It's another business day. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Business Morning. 55 minutes of business awaits you right here. I'm Amy John Mekwa. We start as usual from the global space, and we see that for the very first time in 3 days, oil prices climbed because of supply worries just resurfacing after the United States President Donald Trump announced a reversal of a license given to Chevron to operate in Venezuela. Potentially, that tightens crude supply. So we see a 16 cent, that's a 0.3% added to Brent to bring it up to $72.72 a barrel, while for WTI is also 0.2%, brings it up to $68.78. You would notice that especially for WTI, it's been under 70 for most off this week. So today we see, while it was at 67 about this time yesterday, it's 68.678 for this morning. And Trump on Wednesday said he was reversing that license given to Chevron to operate in Venezuela by his predecessor Joe Biden more than 2 years ago. Chevron exports about 240,000 barrels of oil per day of crude from Venezuela operations. Over a quarter of the country's entire oil output, and ending the license means that Chevron will no longer be able to export that 250,000. And also, U.S. crude oil stockpiles fell unexpectedly last week as refining activity ticked higher, while gasoline and distillate inventories posted surprising gains. Well, we're still staying in the oil space, but domestic here in the front, we see Dangote refinery has announced a 65 naira reduction in the ex-Deport price of premium motor spirits. You call it more petrol. That brings it down from 890 naira to 825 naira per liter. That's the ex-Depot price. According to the company, the new price takes effect from Thursday, today, February 27, as part of efforts to stabilize the market and reduce living costs for Nigerians. Of course, Nigerians will be very happy about this. This is the second PMS reduction that has been announced in February, following an earlier 60 naira cut in December. The refinery also reduced fuel prices by 70 to 17 naira 50 kobo during the Yuletide. Remember, that's our special Christmas gift. Dangote is assuring Nigerians of a steady fuel supply through its partner retail outlets and urges marketers to align with the initiative. Still in Nigeria now, the World Bank says it has approved $2.2 billion in new loans for Nigeria for this year. This according to the latest project list. The funds will be allocated across 6 projects with approval set to begin from March 17. These projects focus on economic resilience, education, health, and digital infrastructure. Key allocations include $800 million for nutrition, $552 for education, $500 million for digital growth. Others are $300 million for health security and another $300 million for displaced communities. According to the World Bank, Nigeria's debt to International Development Association, that's the IDA, is currently with this at $16.8 billion and ranking it the 3rd largest borrower. Meanwhile, Nigeria had previously received $1.5 billion in 2024 for economic and development programs. Yesterday, the Trade Union Congress rejected that gradual increase in the value-added tax as proposed in the tax reform bills currently before the National Assembly. The Secretary General of the Union, Mr. Nuhu Toro, made this known during the ongoing public hearing, this time by the House of Representatives Committee on Finance. The TUC also disagrees with the Nigeria Revenue Service collecting royalties instead of the NMDPRA. And meanwhile, the Nigeria Customs Service fears that the proposed Nigeria Revenue Service bill is likely to repeal the Nigeria Customs Service Act. Here is the report.
You're welcome, sir. It's a full house as the House of Representatives commences its 3-day public hearing on the 4 tax reform bills. The session begins with the chairman of the House Committee on Finance highlighting the tax laws which the new bills seek to repeal.
The Companies Income Tax Act 1979, the Value Added Tax Act enacted in 1993. The Personal Income Tax Act, enacted also in 1993. The Income Tax Authorized Communications Act, enacted in 1966. Deep Offshore and Inland Basin Act in 1999. Industrial Development Income Tax Relief Act in 1971. Petroleum Profit Tax Act in 1959. That was the year I was born.
The hearing is declared open by the Leader of the House, who is representing the Speaker, and submissions are received from invitees.
It will be of great benefit for this committee to consider making exports from Nigeria to be zero rated. That way, exporters from Nigeria will be competitive globally.
The TUC rejects the gradual increment of VAT from 7.5% to 15%. Our reason is simple. Increasing it will place additional burden on Nigerians, many of whom are already struggling.
The Nigeria Customs Service, in its submission, raises jurisdictional conflict issues with the proposed Nigeria Revenue Service Bill.
The Nigerian Revenue Service Establishment Bill 2024, Section 1, it provides a legal framework for the administration of taxes and revenue under any law, where Section 42 defines tax. So this particular section subsumes everything that is provided under Section 3 and 4 of the NCS Act 2023. We should encourage collaboration, integration of operations between customs and the tax authority, not to abolish customs or not to repeal a law because we want to do another law.
As day one of the hearing wraps up in the House of Representatives, some participants raised concerns about the proposed use of technology for tax collection, while others urged the National Assembly to ensure that executive orders which are tied to laws that will be repealed by the new tax bills are reflected in the Nigeria tax bill to take away any ambiguity and avoid dampening investors' confidence. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
So we thought that the controversy and argument around the tax reform bill was over after the politicians had an agreement on the sharing formula, but it seems it's far from over. Let's get the views of Mr. Bismarck Rwani, the Chief Executive Officer of Financial Derivatives Company, on this. Mr. Rwani, I know you've been following this story. The Senate are done with their public hearing. Now is the House of Representatives, and we hear, some arguments and non-agreement of some parts coming up. I do hope this will not, at the end of the day, whittle down the strength of this reform that we seem to have celebrated long before now.
Good morning. Thank you, Ian, for having me. The problem with taxes are that they say that two things are certain in life, death and taxes. But taxes are very, very important. But what makes it quite confusing is that Nigerians are probably the least tax compliant set of people in this region, because only less than 8 or 9% of the Nigerian people pay taxes in any form. Therefore, and that's income taxes. Therefore, the country is left with no choice but to use what we call the benefit approach to taxes, which are easy to collect and easy to administer. For people to come out and say, please do not introduce or do not increase value-added taxes, when you know that there are lots of exemptions from these taxes, makes it, it's quite confusing. So I think we are just going through the process of negotiations. The unions are making their voices heard. Traditional rulers are saying some things here and others. So I think that quite confident that in the next few days, the tax reform will go through, subject to the amendments that are being discussed. And therefore, we move on and ensure that, one, the incidence of tax falls on those who can afford it, and two, that the amount of tax collected actually increases, thereby increasing our tax to GDP ratio. to where it is. We are way below the average across the world. In fact, much lower than most of our African countries and peers. I think that's what is important. But having said that, I wanted to jump into this whole Dangote refinery reduction in price, which was quite fascinating to me, in the sense that this reduction is 7% now, but if you add the previous 60 naira to the 65 naira, we're talking about 125 naira down at a time when global oil prices have actually gone down by only 10%. We've seen about almost a 14% reduction in price. So what does it mean? It means that Dangote's efficiency is passing on the cost efficiency of its production to the market. It is also establishing its position as a price leader in an industry which is under the, where there are many players. So I think that's important. But meaning between everybody here, we should know that the price of petrol and the price of diesel are major causative factors for inflation in Nigeria. To a large extent, almost 14 to 15% of the inflation causative factors come from the cost of logistics. And when you look at the difference between rural and urban inflation, you will find out clearly that the difference between urban and rural inflation is actually due to the cost of moving goods and moving services across regions. Therefore, it's a very, very significant development at this time by the Dangote refinery to bring down prices. And we are hoping that it is true that it will happen, that producers of goods and services will actually pass on part of this benefit to the public. Prices are normally sticky downwards, and you will see that we do not believe that initially, at least for the next 2 weeks or so, that transport fares will go down. But after a while, it has a what they call a push-on effect, a knock-on effect to bringing down price of transport fares, price of goods and services. And we've seen that in our survey of commodities as well. That we are
Sorry, Mr. Rwani, just a minute before you head to, the domestic commodities and how this slash in the price is going to affect that. Let's just take a break. We'll be back to continue that. Welcome back to Watching Business Morning, and we've been discussing at the commodities space, of course, first of all, the slash in the price of petrol by Dangote refinery, and now we still have Mr. Rwani, Mr. Bismarck Rwani with us to tell us how we hope this will seep down to commodities at this time. Mr. Rwani.
Yeah, it's interesting that they say at times when good things don't happen, they happen in bulk or together. We've seen this drop in the price of petrol in all about 125 naira in the last 2 months, coming to almost 14-15% drop in the price of petrol. We've seen diesel actually also decline in the same proportion. We have seen the currency appreciate significantly, and we are seeing signs that inflation may be beginning to taper. But I don't want us to get ahead of us. But what we've seen, noticed in the last few days, well, the price of pepper has been up 100%, which is interesting. Tomatoes is also up 14%. We attribute most of this to the fasting that's going to start by Saturday. But we've seen some items fall quite sharply. We've seen rice down by 5% to 90,000 naira a bag. We've seen garri fallen by 2.86%, and wheat flour down by 10%. And more than anything else, we saw Irish potatoes down by 11%. But the goods that stayed flat, that there were no price changes, are beans, yam tuber, eggs, and also sweet potatoes and onions. So what are we seeing for beans? Beans remains at 100,000 naira. Pepper bag, I already said that was up to 120,000 naira. Tomatoes up by 33% to 40,000, and rice down by 5% to 95,000. Garri is at 33,000 naira a bag. So what we are looking out for is from Saturday, when the fasting starts, we begin to see that the price of tomatoes, the price of pepper, the price of all the perishables and things they use for fasting, either before fast or breaking fast, we see the price up. We also think that because people start going for the lesser Hajj, we might see a higher demand for foreign exchange, and we don't know how that will play out at this time. But generally speaking, one interesting development in the commodity space is cocoa. Cocoa has gone up again. It dropped to about 8,000. Now it's up to $9,219 a ton. Don't forget, 2 years ago it was about $2,000 a ton. So it's up by 400% to 500%. For Nigeria, it means that our export earnings from cocoa will be anything between 2.7 to almost $3 billion. That is quite huge, and that supports the reserves, it supports the export earnings, and also it supports taxes that the farmers will pay. And it also creates a boom environment in Osun State, Ekiti State, and Oyo State, for example, and Ondo State. So we see that happening. So generally speaking, also another important commodity news is that the price of LNG went up by about 4%, to about $4 per BTU. But Shell is saying that they are forecasting a 60% increase in demand for LNG by the year 2040. Nigeria is a major producer of LNG. We have Nigeria, Mozambique, and Angola to a large extent. And even now, we are going to see investments in LNG in certain parts of West Africa. So having said that, it looks like the long-term trajectory for commodities in Nigeria, export commodities are higher, and domestic commodities are beginning to see some slowdown in price rises because of, one, harvests, two, the lower logistics and petrol costs, and three, appreciation of the currency. That's the outlook for commodities, at least for the next 2 to 3 weeks.
All right, Mr. Rwani, but I don't know, to me, it's a bit sad that we have to be checking, when it's harvest season and planting season, then we can expect the prices to fluctuate following the seasons. It doesn't look like we're doing a whole lot about preservation and storage, processing, so that even off-season, we still have some of these, especially the perishables, at good prices.
Yes, you're right. But let's take it this way. One, there's a commodities exchange. So once people now know that they can buy into the futures market or even forward markets in commodities, then it becomes profitable to invest in storage and preservation. So let's take the whole value chain. One, production process is improved by fertilizers and seedlings. Two, the transportation of products from the producing area to consuming area is reduced because of two things. One, concession of the roads, and two, the lower petrol prices. Then within the production areas, we have the storage facilities. So all of these investments are taking place almost simultaneously. But you see that the level of price volatility has been pretty wide. They've been swinging in all directions because of harvest and seasonality. Now this is what brings up the opportunity to invest in storage and preservation. And I think that's the next stage, and you will begin to see that happen soon. But for now, it's not happening, and it's a very important observation by you to notice that. And most investors, if you and I can notice that, you can imagine that investors are also doing that. Don't forget that even in the smuggling process, goods are brought in from outside the country through the borders into this place and taken out. And people, they have very efficient ways of transporting these goods and storing them so that the spoilage level is reduced. It's the next big investment opportunity: storage, processing, and also packaging.
I wonder how you think attention can be accelerated in that part, because obviously the incentive is there. Food business is always good business at any point of the value chain. But how can we maybe make it more attractive for investment and investors?
Well, you make a point about this opportunity. One thing I must point out, and 2-3 days ago when we spoke, we noticed that there was a threat to go on strike by the Ipman and all of that because of what they call the bridging and equalization of prices across the country. What I can now say is that the Dangote Group has, on their own, brought in trucks and have actually emphasized almost an equalization of the price across the country. If that is the case, and the farmers know that the price of petrol is the same almost everywhere, they take advantage of that equalization to produce and transport to the other markets, and then reduce the seasonality effect of prices. I think that is very key. But there's a time lag between when you notice an opportunity, when you invest in the opportunity, and when the impact is felt. So I think that's extremely important. But we have to be patient to allow, one, people to invest, two, for people to now begin to reap the benefits of that investment and invest in the second phase, what we call there's early stage investment, there's middle stage investment. So that entire scenario has to be built out. But it's important now that the markets and the consumers are now beginning to determine what you produce and determine the price at which you can sell, because there's a lot of consumer resistance we are seeing across, right? So even when costs were increasing, consumers were resisting this and compelling producers, one, to produce efficiently, and two, to absorb some of the increased costs by themselves rather than passing it on to the market.
All right, Mr. Arani, thank you so much. We do hope that it will become more glaring, those opportunities, and investors will be attracted to it. Mr. Bismarck Arani is the Chief Executive Officer of Financial Derivatives Company. Thank you so much for your time.
It's my pleasure.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll head to the markets. And one interesting sector seems to be gaining grounds. We'll talk about it after the break here on Business Morning. Stay with us. You're welcome back. Still watching Business Morning. Let's see what happened at the market yesterday. Domestic market, at the NGX, we saw a drop at the NGX. The all-share index lost 0.04% to close at 107,798.99. Equity cap 67.179. The activity chart, well, we seem, I think, mostly red is what we had at the close of trade. Top gainers are not those you're very familiar with: Omorit, Afriprod, and Caverton. While the top losers, insurance, Unicel, as well as TIP. So, but we noticed that in the last, well, I think since late last year, we've seen a lot of activities around the insurance. Perhaps this was even before that third-party policy implementation instruction was given. But we've seen, for instance, up until Wednesday, yesterday, we've seen major movement around insurance stocks. At the close of trade yesterday, for instance, we saw that insurance had gained about 500 billion. That's the market cap. Had surpassed 500 billion at the NGX. So perhaps is it just the third-party insurance implementation that is giving the sector this attention, or are there others? Well, let's find out from a player in that industry. He's the Chief Executive Officer of BSL Insurance Brokers Limited, Mr. Oke Odu. Mr. Odu, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Nini. Good to be here.
Yeah, so your sector is receiving a lot of attention now. Has it dripped down to individual players? I mean, when I say individual, not you as a person, but companies. Have you started seeing the impact of this implementation of third-party policy?
Well, we are going to begin to see the impact, and I want to start by commending the National Insurance Commission leadership and the team. We are going to begin to see the impact. There's collaboration now between our regulator and the Nigerian police in enforcing this directive. Okay, and again, there's heightened enlightenment. Companies are now deliberately trying to enlighten the populace on the importance of this particular insurance. Because you don't put your vehicle on the road without having any form of insurance. It's not about you. It's about potential liabilities. It's about the fact that you could kill somebody. You could damage other people's property. So that's a critical insurance that is backed by law that every motorist is supposed to carry. So we think that very soon, because of the work that has gone into it, because of the effort of the regulators, because of enlightenment that is ongoing, we think that very soon we're going to begin to see the positive effects.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of Nigerians would say that we do not need the threat of the law to do insurance. It shouldn't be that way if the insurance companies themselves are able to win the trust of the people and make yourself, relevant in all of this, the accidents or potential accidents.
Yeah, let me say this. The insurance industry has remained very stable for a long time now. If you recall what happened during the NSAS period, the industry paid in excess of 11 billion naira in claims. And again, year on year, the insurance industry pays in excess of 300 billion naira in claims. So the industry has over time proven to be a great supporter of businesses and the best vehicle to preserve wealth. Okay, but there are issues here. I mean, there are issues of literacy levels where people really, the lower rung of the society, find it difficult to understand how the products are run. Okay, there are also issues of perception. Okay, there are perceptions that some of those perceptions are not correct. There are people who just believe insurance companies don't pay claims, which is not true. And you find out that when you dig into it, you see that some of those people really have not had an insurance policy before. Okay, again, there are religious issues. We're a highly religious society. There are people who just believe that nothing will happen to me. Angels are on guard, no weapon fashioned against me. These are all issues. So I wouldn't say the insurance industry is not has not done enough. But do we have more work to do? Yes, we do have more work to do. We need to reach the lower rung. We need to be more proactive. We need to ensure that claims are speedily settled using technology, and ensure that they are fair, friendly, and fast. And I think the industry is working towards all that.
Yeah, so I guess this is a good opportunity for you to speak for the industry, to tell us how you're changing the perception, whether you're using technology or it's just enlightenment. What are some of those things that you think people are perceiving wrongly, which people should know? Talking about, of course, the payment of claims, that is top on the list. So what are those things that you have put together in your industry to win the people onto your side?
Yes, one of the things that people are perceiving wrongly is that insurance is expensive and the insurance is for the rich. And that's just not true. So you find people that are SMEs, that are micro businesses, they just believe that they shouldn't pass through the zero amount of money. But let's look at the third party issue you talked about. For just 20,000 naira, for 15,000 naira, you're getting coverage in excess of 3 million, 5 million naira. Even the tricycle operators, for just 5,000 naira, they're getting coverages of up to 2 million naira. Okay, so people just think insurance is expensive, insurance is for the enlightened. So those are part of the issues of perception that that we are trying to deal with. That look, at every level of business or an individual, you need appropriate insurances to cover you, and they come cheap. I mean, what can be better than you have a vehicle of the cheapest vehicle you're going to get today is about a good vehicle between 5-7 million naira. And you're paying less than 100,000 to secure that vehicle. Okay, now another issue that we're also looking at as an industry is also to fast track the process of claim settlement. The industry has done very well in claims, but we need to now look at the customer experience, which is in line with what you just said. We need to look very closely at the customer experience. Now, claims are supposed to be friendly, fair, and fast, like I mentioned before. There's technology now that is coming in that is helping in inspection, ensuring that inspections are done real time using drones and all that. So we have issues, a lot of changes are going on, and I'm pretty sure that within a short time, a whole lot of those perceptions are going to walk away. The industry also needs to step up in letting people know exactly what they do. We find people who get millions and millions and millions and millions of claims paid by insurance companies, and they don't say a word. So it behoves on us as an industry to send out our message out there and to let people know that look at what we are doing, and we have the capacity to do more.
Yeah, and perhaps you guys should talk more when you pay claims. You know, get airtime or newspaper, pay for it, and then let the world know, or let Nigerians know that for this year, this is what you paid as claims and all of that. And people can verify that. That could also be another way to win the people's confidence. But another issue I'd like to bring up is premium. We know that, wasn't it 2 years ago, there was an increase in the premium, about 200%. Well, when you say, when you say that premium is not for the rich, a lot of people will not agree, because when you calculate, yes, when you compare it to the value of your car, if we're talking about car, but I mean other properties, houses and all of that, it might seem minute, but when, as you know, that we are very religious people in this country, and people calculate and say, what if I live through this year and then nothing happens? Then next year I have to pay the same amount again. Perhaps that should also be taken into consideration, and that might encourage more people to patronize insurance.
Yeah, that's very well said. But let me also say this, okay? The premiums went up because of some of the issues I'm going to mention. Look at inflation today. Look at the cost of construction. Look at the cost of replacing vehicles. We have vehicles that used to sell for 5-10 million naira, brand new vehicles that used to sell for 10-12 million naira. Today they're selling for 70 million. I mean, look at the cost of construction. You know how much it takes to put up a structure today. Okay, so the inflationary trend is quite high. Okay, so the insurance companies also have to charge appropriate premiums to be able to build reserves, to be able to respond. So that's exactly why the premium hikes happened at that point. But generally, I still think that generally the premiums in the industry are quite low compared to what happens in other climes. Okay, but outside the pricing we're talking about, a whole lot of companies have structures where policyholders, companies can pay their premiums instrumentally. They're allowed to pay premiums in installments. And that way you have cover in a very convenient manner. So the industry has also made it possible for more people to embrace insurance in a way that they can pay their premiums, just to give them soft landing. Yeah.
All right, and then when we talk about properties now, not just vehicle, houses and all of that, how do you get into the minds of people to try to get their properties insured, of course, against the different incidents that could happen? How do you make people even think about it? Because we talk a lot about vehicles because there's a law that compels that, but you hardly hear people talk about maybe the gold and properties, housing and all of that.
Okay, sorry, I'm trying to get what you said. How do we get people to buy into insurance
for houses and other things other than vehicle, which the law compels people to?
Yeah, it's basically by enlightenment and letting them understand what value that they are going to benefit. It's basically value. So what the industry needs to do is to keep preaching value, the value we are putting on the table. That look, anything could happen at any time. And once something happens, you have a fallback plan. You can quickly turn to business. If it happens to an individual, unfortunately, the person is no more. The beneficiaries have succor. They have something to fall back on. So it's a critical aspect of financial planning and wealth protection. So that value is what you communicate to the insuring public and to companies that look at what you need to do. We even have schemes that pay you back your lost profits. We have schemes that pay companies profits they have lost as a result of an incident. What can be better than that? Okay, but what I think the industry needs to do is to speak more to the customers. Okay, we've had a lot of conferences, we keep having a lot of conferences, but we need to be talking more to the customers as against talking to ourselves. We need to keep talking to the customers, talking to groups, talking to market associations, talking to trade groups, talking to professional bodies. We just need to be out there, being advocates for what we do.
All right, well, we hope you will lead the park in doing that, Mr. Oke. Mr. Oke Odu is the Chief Executive Officer of BSL Insurance Brokers Limited. Thank you so much for coming on the program. Welcome back to Business Morning. We head to the global scene now. Ladi has been so excited about NVIDIA since Monday. So I think finally you have the results, Ladi. Can we now move on?
Well, I felt, some investors would be, would get some ease because we've seen major sell-offs, with some asset classes, this week, and somehow NVIDIA was supposed to bring some kind of sucker. But I don't think that has happened.
Don't tell me your crypto community has been disappointed, Ladi.
I think they have, at this point.
I was watching the price of Bitcoin move yesterday, and I was like, oh, okay, I thought we had hit bottom. It's time to recover. And it just yes, I think it went as low as 81,000.
Yeah, about 81, 82,000.
At some point. And then before you know it is back to 86.
Yeah. So it's so volatile.
Yes, it is. And it still hasn't started. Has it started trending back up?
No, not yet. It's still ranging, at this point. But
NVIDIA is not the cause. So guys, don't put it on NVIDIA.
Don't blame NVIDIA. They're even saying, DeepSeek is a good thing.
Yeah, I heard that too.
At this point. But let's get to some of the top stories. Now, let's start with South Africa. Still inflation reporting season, and inflation ticked up in January, marking the first uptick since the consumer price basket was revamped, just like Nigeria. However, the headline rate still sits comfortably at the lower end of the central bank's target range. Inflation climbed to 3.2% year-on-year, up from 3.0% in December. Coming in below the 3.3% forecast and well within the South African Reserve Bank's 3 to 6% target range. South Africa's central bank has cut interest rates, opens it's, I think, like 3 monetary policy meetings now, but its last move in January followed a split decision as it stressed the uncertain global backdrop there, just like other central bankers. And to the car industry now, we see Toyota Motor Corp. They saw a 6% boost in their global production for January, marking its first year-on-year increase in 12 months. The automaker produced about 700,000 vehicles last month, fueled by a strong recovery in domestic manufacturing. Production in Japan, that jumped 22%, while North America also saw gains, particularly in Mexico, where output more than tripled thanks to operational adjustments. Following the news, Toyota's Tokyo-listed shares, that rose by 1.7% to 2,771 yen. And we see China is set to inject fresh capital into its 3 largest banks as part of a bold move to support its flagging economy. Sources say at least 400 billion yuan, about $55 billion, will be pumped into Agricultural Bank of China, Bank of Communications, and Postal Savings Bank of China, and that's in coming months. This move follows through on last year's broad stimulus package aimed at boosting economic recovery. And that's according to reports from Bloomberg. And to the social media space now, Meta, they issued an apology today explaining that they had corrected an error that caused some Instagram users to see a surge of violent and graphic content on their personal Reels page. The apology follows complaints from most of these users across social media who voiced concerns about an influx of disturbing and not safe for work material that was in their feeds. And to NVIDIA now, they delivered another blockbuster performance in the fourth quarter with revenue soaring to $39.3 billion, beating expectations of $38 billion and marking a 45% jump from last year's $22 billion. Profits also surged, reaching $22.09 billion, up from $19.36 billion in the third quarter, while gross profit margins held steady at 73%. Looking ahead, NVIDIA's forecast for Q1 revenue is equally impressive, with an expected $43 billion, keeping investors excited on what's to come for NVIDIA. All right, this time we're seeing a trend where governments are cutting spending on aid and increasing spending on defense. Recently, Sir Keir Starmer set out plans to increase defense spending to 2.5% of national income by 2027. Let's bring in Juliana now, our London correspondent. Good morning, Juliana. Great to have you.
Good morning, Laddie.
So we're seeing UK Starmer there. He's to meet President Trump, and he seems to be arming the UK with a boost on defense. What are you hearing about this?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I don't think anybody was surprised following Tuesday's announcement by the Prime Minister that defence spending would increase to 2.5% of GDP by 2027. He actually has hopes of extending that to 3% within the next Parliament. And why is nobody surprised? It's because, of course, the Europeans consider that they are at a really pivotal time in history. I know that a lot of US President Donald Trump's remarks on social media, Truth Social, and at those press briefings can seem quite comical, but I think European leaders were very alarmed at the US calling and describing Volodymyr Zelensky as a dictator. That was a huge kick to the teeth and the stomach, but also a realization that they can no longer, the Europeans, rely on the US for security. So, of course, after the onslaught of the full-scale invasion of Russia, Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, had spoke about this because I think a lot of the British Army's equipment was considered dilapidated. But now, of course, they consider the threat more significant, which is why he's done this. But separately, as you quite rightly mentioned, Sir Keir Starmer is in Washington already. He arrived very late last night. It is going to be blockbuster stuff when he does that joint press conference with Donald Trump. And, he was pretty honest with British reporters when asked if Trump's recent remarks had persuaded him to kind of speed up this push of defense spending. And he said yes. So he's hoping to take that to the table today to try and convince Trump to provide some sort of security for Europe if there is this immediate ceasefire and European and French, European troops and British troops have to be on the ground. They want some sort of cover. But yes, it widely welcomed by all parties across the House. But of course, that reference you made to the cut in aid is very alarming, of course, because it coincides with the cut of US aid. And that is going to impact a lot of charities around the world.
Right. I guess, charities around the world have a tough 2025 coming with the big boys, looking to cut aid, to the rest of the world now. But let's look at the oil industry. We're seeing oil giant BP. They've announced they will cut its renewable energy investments and instead focus on increasing oil and gas production. I guess it's on the back of Trump's drill, baby drill.
Yeah, that's right. I'm happy you said that, not me. Yes. No, you're absolutely right. It's quite interesting, isn't it? So much is happening. And Trump has only been in power since the 20th of January, barely a month. And everybody, including big businesses, are changing their stance. And for years, the only conversation within the oil sector, particularly in the global north anyway, was about renewables, was about cleaning up the dirty mess that had been made for decades. And we had UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres wagging his finger at them. But now, the conversation has shifted. I think, BP hasn't fared well amongst its competitors who don't seem to be losing confidence in shareholders. BP certainly has. And the CEO has decided that, look, yes, drill, baby, drill works well for them. They are going to be investing more in oil. So yesterday they announced that over the next couple of years, they're going to be increasing investments in oil and gas drilling, I think by $10 billion. And within that same period, they're going to be reducing the investments in renewable energy by $5 billion. And I think immediately their shares went up. They've since dipped. But it does appear as if, the conversation is shifting away from the kind of heightened urgency we had from all of the COPs to now a little bit more of a realist, pragmatist, capitalist approach.
Yeah, they're definitely quite interesting with all the pledges, we've had from most of the COPs we've had so far. But, still on President Trump, he's vowing to slap 25% tariffs on the EU. How's this being received over there, in the UK? Are markets reacting? Or did they react
quite
to
extraordinary. It's quite extraordinary, to be honest. Again, outside of, what's happening in the global south, there is a media frenzy at the moment for anything that comes out of the White House. And, we had Emmanuel Macron there just a couple of weeks ago slapping Donald Trump on the knee, seemingly having a great time trying to convince him to tone down his rhetoric against Zelensky. And within 48 hours, during Donald Trump's first cabinet meeting, he says that Europe have basically been screwing the United States for years. Those are his exact words, and that it was created to basically take advantage of America. Now, the European press are up in frenzy. They just cannot believe he's saying this because, of course, the foundations of the European Union, created in 1951, was to ensure long-lasting peace and stability on the continent. But Donald Trump insists it was to screw America, and he says they're going to be screwing them back. And he's announced sweeping, levies of up to 25% on European imports, particularly targeting the automobile industry. And so, Sir Keir Starmer has so much to contend with during that meeting, and he is going to be hosting European leaders in Downing Street this weekend. So yes, very fierce geopolitical arena at the moment. But can we take Donald Trump literally? We don't know. In that same cabinet meeting, Laddie, he said any cabinet member who doesn't support Elon Musk will be thrown out of the meeting. So, we don't know what's going on at the moment, but yes, a lot of people are at the edge of their seats.
Right. 2025 is starting off quite nervous for some countries, and investors right now, but I guess it's a wait and see.
It's a wait and see, and we are waiting and seeing.
Yeah, we're waiting and seeing.
All take out history.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Juliana, for giving us the details there. Thank you.
Thanks, Laddie.
Yeah, so there you have it.
I'm waiting with you guys
and seeing all that's playing out.
Yes,
so far.
yes.
And it'll be interesting to see how the joint press conference between Sir Keir Starmer and President Trump, how that goes. Remember how President Macron had to correct President Trump, on some of his, comments.
Well,
there.
I think, Laddie, another thing that comes out of what President Trump is doing, and Juliana did highlight that, is the fact that before now, it's been, we're doing renewables, we're going to stop coal, stop fossil fuel, we have all the COP meetings pledging an investment, and now President Trump pulls the United States out of the climate change, the Paris Agreement, doesn't really believe in all of those things.
Right.
And then we are seeing a drive of investment towards fossil fuel again.
Just like BP is doing.
So what's going to happen to the issue of climate change, which we say is destroying the world?
Exactly.
And Africa is feeling the biggest.
What happens to
the pains?
Below 2 degrees target?
Exactly. What happens to all the climate change, the flood that we've counted the cost over the years? What's going to happen? Is it all of that will go to sleep as long as President Trump is in the White House?
Right.
Or what?
So that some people can make money instead.
Maddie, I really don't
Investors can get
understand.
happy, at this point.
I think it's just the voice of the powerful setting the trend for the world. So if the powerful of the world say, oh, this is white now and it's going to stay white, then the world agrees. If they say, no, it's just a bit blurry, I think it's a bit of a green.
We'll just take that.
And then we'll all just take that.
It's quite interesting, because, Africa has to deal with, some of these aid, being cut off, at this point. And now we're also seeing, big companies that are investing in renewable energy. They're saying they're going to cut back, on that too.
And now maybe head back to fossil fuel. I think what the DG of WTO, Mr. Kunjewela, said, is just what we should work with as a continent. We have the resources. We have the skills.
Right.
Can we believe in ourselves and look inwards and develop what we have? I mean, if we do that, whether we want to use fossil fuel, if we want to use fossil fuel, we want to use renewables, Africa has the resources and we have the brains.
Right.
So why can't we just look inwards?
Africa, produce, baby, produce at this point.
All right, Ladi, see you at 1.
Thank you.
All right, so that's it on the program. I guess it's just something that we all have to think about and do also. Yes, we love Nigeria and Trump is protecting America. Can Nigeria protect Nigeria? Can Africans, we're struggling to make after work intra-African countries trade. We're struggling with it. Can we believe in ourselves? Anyways, that's it on Business Morning. We'll do this again tomorrow. John Mekwa. Ladi will be back with Aniti Edits at 1 p.m. Business Incorporated. Enjoy the rest of your day.